Okay, short reloading videos. I wanted to do a video about the tools that I use to put an upper together, and I'll probably tack on the tools I use for putting together a lower at the end of this. So look in the description for a timestamp if you're only interested in the tools to put together a lower. Okay, so the most obvious thing to do with an upper is to install a barrel. I have a barrel in the box here. To install the barrel, you would just slip the barrel in. I choose to bed the barrel with a strip of shim stock. So this is 1.5 thousandths shim stock. I have a video of how I bed the barrel with this piece of shim stock, but it suffice to say this goes around the barrel and creates a tighter fit for the, it goes around the barrel extension on the barrel, and then it creates a little bit tighter fit between the extension and the receiver. So if you're going to do that, you're going to need a pair of scissors, you're going to need some shim stock, and that's the only extra parts you need. For anyone else who's just going to slip the barrel in, what you're going to need is I personally like this tool. It's the Magpul Armor's Wrench, okay? And it's got some pins here that will interface with the standard barrel nut. If you have something like a Midwest Industries, you may need their tool. But either way, both of these have a hole for a torque wrench, which is what you're also going to need. I bought a torque wrench. It's a 3/8 drive. And remember not to store these at like maximum torque, right? Back them down a bit. Like that. Don't have them all the way up at 80. But I bought this Tecton impact adapter and reducer set. So I use the 1/2 inch the 3/8 up to a 1/2 inch. That's what this is. So the 3/8 goes on my torque wrench, and then it fits on my 1/2 inch drive tool here. If you have some other kind of, so let's say aftermarket, like a PRI, I have one PRI, Precision Reflex is what it is. They use a spanner wrench. You usually got to make sure that these are either included, which a lot of times they're not, or you have to buy them separately. That would be how I'd install and torque a barrel nut. Okay. Moving on from there, so let's say the barrel's installed. Installing this really doesn't take any special parts, the dust cover, other than there's a circlip here, a C-clip, which is, it's really nice to have a pair of needle nose pliers to install that. I use a lot of slick side uppers. I don't usually have a dust cover, so honestly I don't include it in my kit. For this one, I went out to my garage and I grabbed a pair of needle nose that are in the garage, and I installed the little C-clip. And make sure you're in a clean area, because those little C-clips will fly off to infinity if you mess it up. If you have an A1 or an A2 style rear sight, it's good to have a small pair of vice grips to get the roll pin going. And I included in this list this very inexpensive AR Stoner pin punch set, which has some roll pin starters and some roll pin drivers. Those are nice for getting these roll pins started. You'll also want some 3-in-1 or some kind of oil, which really does help these roll pins run into where they belong. You're also going to need a screwdriver for this one spot. I don't know why they went with a slot on these, but they did. Moving on, I use a hammer to tap in my barrel because mine is shimmed in and it's pretty tight. You may not need this for an upper, but I'd use it because mine are snug. When you put the barrel, backing up a little bit, when you put the barrel nuts on, it's a good idea, unless they tell you not to have some grease. This is Molly grease, 33 MS. I think they have a new number for it these days, 64 or whatever. But this is just a molybdenum and it's a synthetic grease. Aeroshell is what it is. This goes on. I use these little toothpicks right here to scoop a little bit out and apply them to the threads in a couple of places, and I just let it do its thing from there. Out on the barrel, you're going to have a gas block. I use this like $2 set, $3 set from probably Harbor Freight, and it has some small Allen keys in it. Those work for set screw style gas blocks. If you're cross pinning yours, you're going to need more tools than I keep. I use some tape as a masking agent whenever I'm working on stuff. Sometimes you want a little bit of protection in this area for your anodizing in case you're going to be beating around on the upper somewhere and you don't want it to have any blemishes at all. So I like electrical tape, comes off really easy. That's about it for an upper, unless you've got a front sight that you're actually going to need to remove for some reason. You may want this Wheeler Delta. It's a bench block, and it can help you drive in and drive out your front pins on your and then it has some other features. The upper receiver can go into it, I think, like this, so you can work on the sight. It's kind of one of those do a million things tools, and I don't remember what it does anymore, but it does all kinds of things. This is kind of cool. If you get it in a set, I kind of think you should, I wouldn't buy this separate. Maybe get the Wheeler gunsmithing set, maybe. I don't think I've ever used it, but here it is. And it's because I don't usually use fixed front sights. And I don't disassemble my charging handle, which is another thing that it can help you with. I might have used it on the lower, though. I don't know. I probably use this for the lower. And then finally, this is a Wheeler upper receiver clamp. It works for flat tops, and for forged flat tops, and then for forged kind of A1, A2 style. Okay, it'll hold it in there nicely for you, and then you put it into a bench vise. I like these $22 Bessie ones. Bessie from Home Depot. They're real handy. They're good enough. They're not good for, you're not going to want to machine on them. Unless you've got a fixture that you're going to be clamping with it. It's a very rudimentary device. But it works good for this kind of thing. Just put that in there and tighten it down and it'll hold it. Alright, so those are all the tools that I would use for an upper, with the exception of one that I forgot at the beginning of this. I really do like to use these alignment tools for the gas port, gas tube. So let's see. I'm pretty sure that this has to come apart. I'm pretty sure you guys also know how this works, but I am pretty sure I gotta take out the charging handle, which is difficult with this particular charging handle. I won't lie. I'll just take it out that way. This goes through the back, and then that comes out. All right, so as you're tightening down the barrel nut, you make sure this is out of the way, like well back. Tighten the barrel nut. When you're in the right torque range, you start pushing forward with this and seeing if you can get through the barrel nut. It's not all barrel nuts require this. Some are like a really low profile and they actually slip underneath it. There's a lot of variety out there, but for a mil spec type build, these are kind of nice. They make sure that all your parts, what is that? welded spring, all the goodies on the nut and the delta ring and all the other stuff is lined up right, so that your gas tube is actually going to make it into this hole. So kind of a nice tool to have. I think this one is also Wheeler. A lot of my stuff came from a Wheeler Delta series kit I bought. But this is the pile of tools that I would use. This Magpul wrench is really nice for muzzle devices if they're standard ones, because it has a wrench, open end box wrench right there. So you would slip this on the barrel like so over top of this, and then you'd move it to line up with it like that, and then you could tighten it down. And if you really wanted to, you could use a torque wrench, which would be really awkward, and I would just 2/3 of an ugga-dugga, and that's tight enough. But that's the pile for an upper receiver, and we'll probably continue on with lower. Okay, so for the lower, I use the same vise. I use a Magwell vise block. I will use some more electrical tape for masking. Gonna need this Magpul Armorer's wrench. Hopefully you don't need your hammer. Depends on how you decide to do this. And then you're gonna need some vise grips, maybe, and a couple of neat little tools that I really like. And obviously, if you're going to be using 80% lowers, you're going to need a whole setup for routing jig, or maybe you're going to use the drill press old school style. Much respect. But as far as tools, you're going to need whatever tool that your pistol grip, assuming you have a pistol grip, connects with. A lot of times they are flathead screwdriver. A lot of times they're also some kind of Allen key, and they might even be a Torx or a Phillips at some point, but you know, that will be something you need a tool for. Usually that's not insurmountable for most people. There are some roll pins on the lower, if you so choose to be insane enough to need to drive them. Here is the roll pin starter and driver set. You may need that. The trigger guard, I use this tool from Wheeler. This is the trigger guard install tool. This thing is a lifesaver. Use 3-in-1 oil and go slow. Those are my pieces of advice on even with this tool. That's a real nice tool. Pivot pin. I use this tool. I don't know what it's called or where I got it. I don't know if it's Wheeler. I really don't. But there's tools like this out there. This is really nice. It's something to look into. It costs a little bit of money. I think it's $15-20 or something like that. But if you're going to do more than one of these, this really just makes it ridiculously easy and cheap. A lot of guys homebrew a tool like this too. All right. If you decide to go punch route, you're going to need a hammer. And if you decide to do the roll pin for the bolt hold open, for the, what is that called? The bolt hold open lever, you might want a pair of vice grips to get it started. I think you're insane. You should definitely look into the K&S pin that has the C-clip in it. So you go through the bolt hold open lever's hole with this pin, and then you just snap a C-clip on it, and boom, it's there forever. You never have to drive yourself insane running that roll pin. If you do that, and you use this tool on the trigger guard, there's almost no more roll pins in the lower that you would have to be beaten away on with tape and hammer and this insanity, whatever. Now, back in the receiver extension area, a rifle receiver extension or buffer tube will most likely, a mil-spec version will use this hole here, will go onto it, and then you can tighten it onto the receiver or into the receiver. If it is a carbine style, you have this detail here, this wrench, which will come on, and then you can tighten everything up using this. So that's the carbine wrench And again, this here is another, is a sort of a wrench itself that comes in handy. That is that tool. If you have some kind of special parts that you're buying, they may need special tools. You need to look into that. But this is what I keep in my set for the lower. The lower is a lot less involved, in my opinion, than the upper, just because a lot of the parts retain themselves with springs and pins and things like that, and interference with other parts. So that's the lower. It's a lot shorter of an ordeal, in my opinion.